Thank you for joining us on Indivisible. I'm your host, John Stubbins. We're thrilled to have you with us this afternoon, America. And we're streaming live today on pill.net, freedomfirstnetwork.com, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. Please subscribe to the show on Indivisible with John Stubbins at YouTube or by going to stubbins.org. I also want to give a shout out to Sidney Powell's new website, defendingtherepublic.org. So let's get straight to it today. We've got barbed wire around the Capitol, which means that you and I, if we want to go see our Congress people, our senators, we can't even get into the Capitol right now unless we have an appointment or some kind of special venue or meeting that gives us authorization to be in the Capitol. We've got the Minnesota George Floyd trial about to begin, which that looks like that's going to be a powder keg. There's also wire and an extension of barriers surrounding the courthouse there. We've got an open sieve at a border, in our southern border, and Joe Biden seems to be saying, come one, come all. We have no problem with you being here. We're going to give you everything, and it's on the back of the American taxpayer. That's you, because Joe Biden wants to get even with President Trump. So that's where we are. We've got, thankfully, restrictions on COVID lifting in most of the red states, and they've been lifted. And, some of these blue states, they just refuse to do the right thing. We've obviously got the Gavin Newsom recall effort, the lawsuit in California on the election integrity, and many other things. But today, I want to bring on a special guest, a renowned journalist who's been doing this since 1988, all over the world, from the Middle East to the Mexican border, to domestic, to dealing with every issue that you can think of that should matter to you. My guest today is Lara Logan. I want to bring Lara on the show. How you doing, Lara?
I'm good. Thank you, John. How are you?
We're so thrilled to have you. Thank you, my friend, for being here. I want to talk about the border a little bit. And I know that you constantly have an ongoing investigation going on down there. And I know you're getting ready to go back. And you were obviously there for the Mexican Mormon Massacre, which we'll get to in a minute. But what are your thoughts on the border situation right now?
Well, I can tell you that I got my hands on a video today that was really something I had never seen at the U.S. border before. I've spent pretty much most of the last 2.5 years covering the border and stay in constant contact with people down there. Also, I live in Texas, not that far from the border, and I'm in the Hill Country. And so I stay up to date on these issues, and also it's part of life here, right? Sure. So this video showed just a stream of people. I mean, a packed mass of people stretching as far as you could see in the frame, waiting to get into rafts and come across the river and come into the U.S. And for people who are trying to understand this, John, the simplest thing I can say about the southern border is that the real problem here is we only talk about the southern border when we have a humanitarian crisis or an immigration crisis. We never talk about the security crisis at the southern border, which has been going on for years. It's a bipartisan thing. There are both Republican and Democrat administrations that have been complicit in hiding and failing to respond to the real security threat on our southern border.
Amen.
And so, unfortunately, the focus is always when we're talking about people, we're taking agents off their security duties to put them on migrant care. And all of the emphasis, all of the headlines, all of the money, all of the political focus is on immigration. And what that means is that the cartels, which have become the most powerful criminal organizations on earth, pretty much, get a free pass when it comes to controlling the border, deciding what crosses, when it crosses, how many. They're making billions and billions of dollars. The amount of money they're making, John, dwarfs any budget that law enforcement in the United States has. And so while you have agencies like the DEA and Homeland Security Investigations and other law enforcement bodies in the U.S. who have given everything, I mean, really, I know a lot of agents, and I have seen firsthand what it's taken from them, how committed they are. I know some who are in Mexico who work under incredibly difficult circumstances and at great personal risk. So taking nothing away from them, because they give everything they've got to this fight.
Sure.
The reality is that more than 50 years later, we are losing. The United States is losing this fight. The government of Mexico today takes its orders from the Mexican cartels. They are a parallel shadow government. They have more power than the Mexican government. They have more money. They don't have to worry about balancing their budgets or international agreements or human rights. Right. They're incredibly violent and cruel and vindictive and truly evil. They hurt their own people on a daily basis, and they hurt anyone that gets in their way. And on top of that, they're very, very sophisticated and smart and strategic. They have intelligence. They have counterintelligence. They have strategic partnerships with terrorist groups like Hezbollah and ISIS. And they have strategic partnerships with U.S. adversaries like China. People don't realize that we're in the midst of the worst narcotics crisis in history. And people can roll their eyes at that and think, oh, all these, people who are against drugs, and there's a move to legalize all drugs in this country. And and I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is a street drug called fentanyl that began as a pharmaceutical. And when U.S. pharmaceutical companies basically gave their entire manufacturing capability to the Chinese, one of the things that happened was that China had access to every drug that America has access to. And they figured out that fentanyl, which is used in surgeries and is an extremely effective painkiller, an opioid type of painkiller, would be an incredibly powerful and addictive street drug. And around 2012, the Chinese started to introduce this to the US street. DEA agents have told me they didn't even know what it was. They had never seen anything like it. And one DEA agent, in fact, he's in charge in San Francisco, John Callahan, he said to me, Lara, my agents weren't prepared for this. He said, we're used to fighting cartels. We're not used to going into the bedroom of a 14, 15, 16-year-old girl with, pop star posters on the walls, right? Who's in the second stage of rigor mortis. And that's happening, John, because fentanyl is being mixed into every kind of narcotic you can imagine, whether it's marijuana or meth or heroin or cocaine.
Crystal meth.
All of it. And that's why the overdose deaths from from meth are up 30% or 35% in the last fiscal year. But if you look at the latest numbers, something that you can report that really is not being reported or well understood is if you look at two of the most significant figures. One is unaccompanied minors. Yes. How many unaccompanied minors are being apprehended at the border? And one is the seizures of fentanyl. Okay. So if you look at unaccompanied minors, it's the highest that it's that it's been in a very long time. Some people say the highest ever. And if the figures, I have them here. Look, so in January, there were 5,858 unaccompanied minors arrested at the border. That went up in February of this year to 9,457. Okay, that's a jump of 3,599 unaccompanied minors. And why is that significant? Because all unaccompanied minors are they get automatic entry into the U.S. You still have to go through the system, but they don't get turned away. And if you look at that, the total for this fiscal year in 5 months this year, that has actually equaled. It's on a par with the same number of unaccompanied minors who were detained in the whole of the last fiscal year. literally the whole of the last fiscal year. And this is before the summertime. This is before the migration patterns pick up and you get people really pouring over the border. And it's already, just at this pace, on track to be, around 100,000 or more by the end of the year. So that's extremely significant. And the other thing is that in the first 5 months of this fiscal year, they have already seized 4,923 pounds of fentanyl at the border. That is more. It's more than the whole of the last fiscal year. So what does that tell you? That fentanyl is going to be through the roof, that overdose deaths, which were over 80,000 last year, are going to be higher, and that the cartels are exploiting the movement of people across the southern border.
Yeah, and here's the crazy thing. By the way, the cocktail of heroin, crystal meth with the fentanyl and all these other things, it's because I was looking at a report on this yesterday where the heroin has really crept into high schools. It's become a real problem. And when you mix that, even with the George Floyd situation, which we'll get into in a little bit, he had fentanyl and he had a mix of several other things in his system when the whole deal occurred up in Minneapolis last summer. But this is affecting everyone, and people don't understand how deadly this is. To me, this is almost the CCP's version of stealth jihad, where this is just one other way to take out our people, and it's killing them. The numbers are staggering, like you said. And
yes,
and these cartels, your investigations, Lara, have been outstanding because you're shining a light on these cartels, what they're doing, and you're absolutely right. They do outgun and outman. Here's my question: our military personnel have to know at the Pentagon what's going on down there. I guess my question would be, when does the rubber meet the road, and when are they going to stop this? Or do they want this to happen?
So, okay, that's a very good question, because actually the military is, they're not doing any real-time assessments on the cartels. No. There's one that goes back years that I got my hands on that was the first kind of comprehensive look at the cartels as they are now, as they've become for a long time. And it's really quite shocking. They haven't even really identified the scale of the problem and put it into a form and put it into an actionable context for policy and lawmakers to address. But here's the thing, John. The United States has been using U.S. law enforcement to counter the cartels for more than half a century. U.S. law enforcement jurisdiction ends at the U.S. border. It's the same as everybody else. They have no jurisdiction in Mexico. They are allowed to operate in Mexico with the authority and permission on the terms dictated by the Mexican government. Right. Well, when the Mexican government is taking its orders from the cartel, what do you think happens? They don't cooperate. So how do you know this? Well, not so long ago, in fact, just as Biden was taking power, the Mexican government doubled down on its sovereignty and its sovereign territory. And what did they do? They passed new laws that made it an offense punishable as treason for a Mexican law enforcement officer to engage with U.S. law enforcement without reporting it in detail, and also going through what they created was a fusion cell through the Foreign Office in Mexico. So basically, politics took over cooperation between law enforcement, all those relationships that have taken years to build, et cetera, and all of the informants and all of the good people in Mexican armed forces, in the Marines and the National Guard and the state police, they're all at risk now and exposed. So what do you think happens? Bam. It's just really like obliterating, any kind of cooperation between them, because at the same time, the Mexican government removed diplomatic the immunity that U.S. law enforcement have from prosecution in Mexico
Right.
under Mexican law. They stripped them of that. So they really went out of their way to kill cooperation between the two countries. So what has been proposed by Jason Jones, a former captain in the Texas Department of Public Safety, who ran the Cross-Border Operations Center, did a lot of counterterrorism work. He is one of the strongest voices proposing and pushing for the Mexican cartels to be designated as foreign terrorist organizations. And of course, if that happens, DOD takes over the helm, right? It's no longer a law enforcement only mission. And so there is a lot of resistance in the US to that. And this is something that Donald Trump, in fact, I met personally with Bill Barr when he was still AG, and he said, absolutely, the cartels need to be designated as foreign terrorists.
I remember that.
Right? The obstacle is the principle, because people say under the definition of a foreign terrorist organization, the one part that the cartels don't meet is the ideological component. But if you actually look at what the cartels are doing, they have been assassinating Mexican politicians and public officials and local state officials for many years now. And they don't just move into an area, they take over the government and the governing of that area, and they have full control over that. And they've actually moved into the, even into the national government. So it really is a thin argument. And what we're not doing while we're arguing about how we should address this is actually doing anything to really to go after the cartels, because everything you do regarding people is a Band-Aid on basically an IED or a gunshot wound, because you're not going to the root. It's not just about the root causes of immigration, as the Biden administration talks about. It's the root causes of the violence. And this nonsense that they've been pushing for years that, as long as Americans have an appetite for drugs, it's all their fault, right? They're the problem. Well, you know what China and the cartels did? With fentanyl, they've got a drug that you make in a lab. You don't have to grow it like the heroin and, the poppies and the coca plants and the marijuana anymore. Mm-hmm. So what does that mean? You can create unlimited amounts of it in laboratories.
Synthesized.
It's cheap. It's cheap, cheap, cheap. And what does that enable your drug dealers to do? Well, every street gang in the US depends on the Mexican cartels for their number one currency, right? Which is narcotics. So what are they doing? They're pushing all these drugs that are mixed with fentanyl, or the fentanyl itself, or the fake pills. And when they run out of something that you might want, like maybe you want your weed or maybe you want your meth, they're saying, waiting for the shipment, but I got this. This will tide you over. And they're actually creating a demand for narcotics where none existed, or for certain narcotics where that was never consumed, like meth. Boston, New England, Northeast, they never had a meth problem. They have a meth problem today, and a big meth problem. And the other thing no one talks about is Narcan. Narcan is hailed as a miracle drug. It reverses the effects of an opioid overdose, and it has saved many, many people in this country. But Narcan is not the solution to addiction, because being brought back from an overdose, right, by Narcan, you don't always come back with full brain function. There are people in this country being brought back with 80% brain function, 60% brain function. And so what is the cost of that? And the last thing I will say to you is the Chinese are not so surreptitious about drug warfare. They have a history of drug warfare, which anybody can read about and find. It goes back to before the Opium Wars, actually, when the British brought opium into China from India. Opium was already in China, but the British brought in Indian opium. And so the Chinese are very familiar with what narcotics can do in a war, because many of them blame opium for losing that war. However, there are two Chinese colonels who wrote about drug warfare in a book in 1999, I believe was the first edition that was published, and they've just republished it with an updated version. And it's called Unrestricted Warfare. And they talk openly about drug warfare there. This is something the Chinese used against the Japanese. They used it against the US in previous conflicts, and they're using it now. Because what did China do? They made a big show at this international conference of banning fentanyl at the request of the Trump administration. Well, I mean, it's just a show, because what they do is take the precursor chemicals that are the most important component. Without the precursors, you can't make the drug. So without it, you don't have a drug. and they're shipping the precursor chemicals to the Mexican cartels. And the last thing I will say to that, John, is every parent should care about the fact that the opioid crisis today is fueled by fentanyl and fake pills. These are counterfeit pills. Right. They are not Oxy. They are not Xanax. They are not Adderall. They're not any of the things that kids today might think they're buying to get them through their exams or to calm their nerves or whatever. Maybe, forget about their troubles at a party on a Friday night. These are pills that are manufactured with pill presses that are sent from China, counterfeit pill presses, counterfeit dyes to make counterfeit pills.
Synthetic.
Synthetic, but also, most importantly, fake. Just like if you go and buy a fake purse on the street, it's not Gucci, it's not Chanel. These are fake pills. They can have baby formula in them or baby powder and fentanyl. That's what they're really made of. They don't have any of the ingredients of Adderall or Xanax. What they have is something, completely innocuous and then enough fentanyl potentially to kill you. And what DEA told me is that they're seizing over 1 million counterfeit pills every day at the southern border, every single day. And when they're testing those pills in the labs, 27% are laced with enough fentanyl to kill you.
Sure.
Kill you.
Yeah.
And it can take one pill.
And from Pablo Escobar to El Chapo to Medellin cartel, all of this now has worked its way up to Mexico. The one thing I say, President Trump, at least he had a system that he was able to put together so that we weren't dealing with this rush to our southern border. Whether it was Guatemala or whatever, he had an arrangement with them to handle this before it became a caravan. Okay. And this is going to lead into our next. That's right.
Without a doubt. And by the way, John, he also would have designated the cartels as terrorist organizations if he hadn't faced so much resistance internally.
That's right. That's right.
The man was under siege 24/7.
He was under siege from the time he came down that elevator. But here's the thing, escalator.
Which is, by the way, in information warfare, that's called a denial of service attack. Right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, which was It was deliberate, it was planned, and it was, it was well funded and orchestrated.
There's a lot of people out there that want this to happen, whether it's the drugs, whether it's the child trafficking, whether it's the cheap labor. We understand this. Look, here's one thing I would propose, and it needs to be a national campaign, almost on wartime footing, as far as I'm concerned, because of the severity of it. There needs to be a national educational video, if need be, that goes everywhere, social media, television, you name it, that explains what is in the fentanyl, what's in it, why it's killing people. And if you haven't heard about it, you better learn.
You know what, John?
Because you could be next.
You know what I can tell you? DEA has made videos. People have made educational videos. And the real problem here is that everything has been politicized. So you're not allowed to talk about the drugs and the cartels, because then you're a racist, or you're xenophobic, or you're, whatever. You're in that basket of deplorables or terrible people. Your journalists need to do their jobs. That's what needs to happen. They need to be journalists and not activists, and not political operatives, and not propagandists, and not, megaphones for one party or another party. That's what journalists are supposed to be doing. We need to do our jobs, and we need to do them properly, the way they're supposed to be done. Not this nonsense that they pass off as journalism today, which is really just about terrorizing people and instituting, using, really what it's about is terrorizing people and intimidating them into silence so that they self-censor, so that no one tells you what they really think, so no one dares to disagree, no one goes against the grain, and so on. That's what needs to happen, because when journalists do their jobs properly, people are properly informed and they make better decisions. And that's not, an absolute principle. Of course, it's, open to abuse and flaws, and we make mistakes and all of those things. But at least the principle is worth upholding. Yes. And that, to me, is what will make a difference, because when the opioid crisis, when it was convenient, we heard about the opioid crisis all the time. It's not convenient anymore. We don't want
No.
to talk about it. So we just don't. So now we don't care that all these people are dying. Now we don't care that kids are dying. I mean,
Oh,
I'm not good at promos, but if somebody is interested in this, they can watch my series on Fox Nation. It's Lara Logan.
I was just getting ready to get into that because, look, here's my stance, and I'm as a military veteran myself, I love this country, and I know what it means. My grandfather, he fought in World War II, and I know the sacrifices that those men in that generation made, not to mention leading up to where we are now from the Middle East. But I want to say this, and I'm not a trained journalist. I'm a citizen journalist. That's what Congressman Nunes called me. But here's my thing. If you don't like it, and I'm talking to the people out there that want to try to deflect and act like it's not a problem, they better wake up, because here's my deal. I don't care if they don't like it. My answer to them is tough. That's too bad. It's time to put on your big boy pants, okay? And start doing something to save our kids, your grandkids, our country. We're hurting, okay? And people need to realize that.
John, I will tell you a secret. So here's a secret for you. Most good journalists are not trained. Okay, I wasn't trained. I never studied a day of journalism in my life. Now, that doesn't mean, that there's no value in it, of course, but going to college and these colleges that are churning out activists and propagandists, that doesn't help you very much. All you need to be a good journalist is to be super naturally nosy, to know who you are, and to be tenacious, not willing to just take no for an answer or to let things go. I mean, because principles are worth fighting for.
Yes.
And the truth is worth fighting for. And it's not always easy to get to it. And sometimes that's not even for a bad reason. I mean, it can be buried, and it can just take a lot of work. It can take commitment. It can take being willing to go to the heart of the story. It can be willing, to work yourself to the bone,
Yes.
right? It can mean a lot of things. But at the end of the day, if you're not willing to stand up and risk and lose, we all say we're willing to risk, but how many of us are willing to actually lose, have lost, right?
I am.
mean, have lost and then still keep up the good fight. And so that means that I had someone, let's just say this, who's in banking, say to me the other day, what can I do? But, I've got to do something. I said, if all you can do is make sure that your bank doesn't start making political decisions about who can be clients, who can have a bank account there, et cetera, then that's enough. We don't all have to stand up publicly. Some of us do. And the more that do, the better. But even in your environment, if you're a teacher, especially if you're a teacher today, right? I mean, what these teachers are being subjected to, professors, we get seduced into thinking that because all we hear about is this one ideology, this one very radical, progressive sort of Marxist communist, I actually call it a tyrannical ideology, because to me, that's what it really is.
Yes.
This one tyrannical ideology represents everybody. No, it doesn't. There are people there, but it's hard to risk everything. It's hard to lose. I know from my own personal experience, but it's also liberating, because when you live in fear, they always have fear over you. And I tell my kids all the time, the fear of something is almost always worse than the something. I would have to say the only thing that's worse than fear is the fear of losing your child, right?
Yeah,
it's not worse than losing them. But
absolutely.
most of the time, fear is worse than the actual thing. We can all handle it. You can get through it. And
Sure.
getting through it is part of making you, it's definitely made me a better journalist, having gone through a lot of difficulties in my career, because I would never have understood what it was like. I mean, I just lived a charmed life, going, one award after another. And when I say charmed, I mean, it was hard, make no mistake. But I just mean, I was at the Super Bowl, and I was invited to all the parties, and I thought that's how the world was for everyone, but it's not.
Yeah.
And I would never have understood that properly if I hadn't been on both sides, both locked out of the Super Bowl and guest of honor, right? I've been both, and I'm an outlier by nature, so I'm comfortable anywhere.
Well, look, a lot of people are not willing to put it all on the line. And look, if you want to save this country, that's what it's come down to. And, I'll tell you right now, you can tell that banker from me that as a veteran, as a citizen journalist who's trying to build a show that will stand for the truth, let him know that we need sponsors on here for Patriots. We'd love to have him. I want to talk about the Mexican Mormon Massacre. And your work has just been brilliant on that, on Fox Nation. And, it ties in to these cartels. Obviously, we saw what happened to that family, that poor family. And, did we ever find out why they were attacked?
It's really interesting, isn't it? We still don't really know why they were attacked. They still don't really know why they were attacked. It was one of the enduring questions that I had at the forefront of my mind the whole time I was in Mexico, and talking to them and meeting many different people in the family. What an extraordinary place where they live, this place, La Mora in Sonora Province. And what an extraordinary community of people. It's really nothing like you expect. And so I was guilty too when I first heard about this, thinking, oh, well, you're living in Mexico. That's cartel territory close to the border there. Every inch of ground is owned by somebody. And so you must somehow be involved with the cartels. And, this must be related to that. I can honestly tell you that based on everything I know at this point, I do not believe that anyone in that family was involved with the cartels. They often get mixed up. This is, by the way, John, something really important I need to say is this family is not the LeBaron family. All of the reporting out there talked about the LeBaron family in Chihuahua. Julian LeBaron is the family spokesperson. That is not the case. This is actually the Langford family. And the Langfords have had a very different history and a very different life in many respects. And it was really hard for the Langford family to be treated the way they were in the media, because there's no compounds there. There's no cults. There's no, pedophilia and, sort of harem of kids marrying their father and all the sort of the horror stories that have been perpetuated over the years and circle around the Mormons. It's nothing like that. These are extraordinary people.
And they built that community with their hard work.
From nothing. And they still do. Still today building it. I mean, as they said, when you plant orchards, you plant for generations, right? Because it takes decades before you make any money from that.
Right.
And that's why most of them come to the US and they work as laborers. They work on solar farms. They work as builders. They work in construction. They work on the wind turbines, by the way. They can tell you about the buckets and buckets of dead birds that they scoop up from those wind farms that nobody in the environmental movement wants to talk about. But so they built it all from scratch, and they live, very closely with the local people there, and they still don't know why this happened to them, and they lost some really extraordinary and beautiful women and lovely children, and the nature of the murders, it was so cruel for some of them to be burned into nothing and not even have a body to say goodbye to. And you really feel that loss. Sometimes
my heart goes out to them, Lara.
Well, thank you. That would mean a lot to them. I'm still in touch with them. They're pretty awesome. And the pomegranates down there are
please let them know. Please let them know that we are praying for them, because when I saw your story, it broke my heart. And all I could think of was the whole time, maybe these cartels thought it was a rival cartel that was trying to maybe get a shipment through, or who knows. But I mean, they had to have binoculars. They had to have known that these were kids, these were women. I mean, I guess they just don't care. They're that ruthless. And for that reason alone, our military, they need to get on the ball, and they need to make that declaration immediately that these cartels are terrorists. It's got to happen.
You know, John, as the family will tell you, they kill people, they kill women and children across Mexico every single day, their own people. In fact, you know, Human Rights Watch had to come up with a term, femicide, to describe the number of women that go missing in Mexico that are murdered. They have mass graves all across the country. They'll go into a party or a wedding and just massacre everybody. They will, you know, kill children in front of their parents, kill parents in front of their children. They'll rape young girls to death. I mean, this is, you know, this is a level of violence that's fueled by narcotics, which knows no limits.
Yeah, where's the Southern Poverty Law Center on that one? Or where's the Southern Poverty Law Center on the new cancel culture, the new racism, the new discrimination? Look, when I was raised, I was raised to believe that all men were equal. It doesn't matter what your skin color is, what your background is. If you're an American, you have the same opportunity as the next person. Okay. And since then, we've had affirmative action, we've had busing, we've had all this nonsense. And here we are today, and now, supposedly, okay, it's okay to be racist now as long as the target is white people. So, you know, we've got BLM, Antifa, we've got these cartels, all of them. And I get really upset when I look at the media, and they always want to bring up Antifa. And I know you've done amazing work there as well, but they never bring up BLM. And I know why they're not doing it. They're not bringing up BLM so that they're not called racist. But guess what? You're getting called racist anyway.
Well, you know, this is what they're doing. They're just taking a knee. People are cowards, and they're moral cowards. And it's wrong. And, you know, I want to say, like, I've done a lot of reporting on Antifa, but far less than many other great journalists out there, you know, and first and foremost of those is Andy Ngo. And Andy Ngo is truly a remarkable journalist and person. And here you have the, as he says it, openly gay son of Asian immigrants. And he's, you know, held up as a symbol of hate because he reports and exposes the real agenda of Antifa and who these people really are, and exposes the rest of the media for covering it all up. I mean, that's outrageous. And now, you know, you have someone in a band who says this was an amazing book, and now the guy has to grovel and apologize and beg forgiveness. That's outrageous. So if you want to know what you can do, if you can't afford to risk your job because you've got kids and you know, you're the breadwinner and all the rest of it, because let's be fair, John, it's not easy for people to risk everything. Well, you know what you can do? You can buy Andy Ngo's book. You know, and you can make sure your kids read Andy Ngo's book, and you can get your friends and relatives to read it, and you can get a MyPillow, and you can eat Goya food products, and you know, you can do those things, and you can
buy American. That's right.
And you can cancel your Disney subscription, and you can say we're not going to do this anymore, and you can say it at your local school, and you can say it at your local grocery store. I do not believe in racism. I don't have a racist bone in my body. I was raised to respect people and treat them with kindness, and I have done that my entire life with every fiber of my being. And so, and my kids know, same rules in my house, kindness and respect, right? And I'm willing to listen to anyone. I have an open heart and an open mind, and I am not going to be bullied or terrorized into submission by anybody or for any reason. Not here, not now, not till my dying day, John. It's not going to happen, John. Never.
Yeah, and I love you for that. And I can speak to what Lara is saying because Lara has been a friend to me. She's been in my corner, whether it's working with Carter. It doesn't matter. Lara has been there.
You get that book made for Carter and that film made for Carter Page.
We're working. Jason called me the other day. We're getting there. We're getting down to the paperwork part of it. I just want to say real quick, the Middle East. I know you did on top of the Antifa work, the Mexican Massacre. You've done so much work that you brought to the forefront in the Middle East, and you went through utter hell, bringing the truth to the American people. And I just want to give you all the credit in the world for standing up and doing the right thing in spite of the fact that you were attacked personally, physically, emotionally, mentally, any way that someone can be attacked. And I just love you for that, Lara.
Thank you, John.
And I know that, that's been a big part of your life. Look, Piers Morgan stood up and said, I'm not going to be bullied, just like you did. And look, I know that someone like Piers Morgan, he's probably made a lot of money. He's probably secure financially to a certain degree. So it might be easier for someone at that level to just like with Oprah on the other side. Oprah didn't start talking racist talk, or LeBron, or any of these people, these rappers,
until they had it all.
Until they made their money off the American people, then all of a sudden they come out with this nonsense. And so, look, I appreciate what Piers Morgan did. And I'm not even the greatest fan of his, but I appreciate him standing up and saying, no, you're not going to cancel me. I don't care if you like it or not. That's tough. And if more people did that, we'd be in a lot better shape. Quick question, Lara.
Yes.
John Durham. We've been waiting for this investigation to conclude.
And waiting.
It seems like it's never going to come to an end. Last night, I heard that we might be a couple weeks away. Have you heard anything?
Well, John Solomon from, Just the News, who did such extraordinary, accurate and insightful reporting on Ukraine that they did an entire impeachment around his reporting, trying to undermine it and destroy him, right? I mean, you really have to be a great reporter when they go to such lengths to try to discredit you, and they fail. Yes. Because the reality is everything that John Solomon reported on Ukraine has been proven to be accurate. In fact, just the tip of the iceberg, right? So him
and Sarah Carter.
Yeah, yes, and Sarah Carter, another person who Sarah's a personal friend and who I love and adore, and isn't just a great reporter, but she's also a spectacular mother with 19,000 little kids. But what I would say, John was reporting that, in the next 6 to 8 weeks and maybe even sooner. I don't play the numbers game. I don't play the timing game.
I'm not holding my breath.
I suck at that, John. That's not my strength, right? However, I would say to you that there's two strands of thought. One is that something is really happening behind the scenes and something is going on. And the other strand of thought is that this is all, misinformation, and it's meant to keep people hanging on, keep you on the hook thinking, okay, they're going to do something, right. and they won't. I don't know the truth. I don't have any facts. Of course, I have seen some very interesting signs that have been over the last few months. Does anyone think it's weird that we haven't had a State of the Union?
I do.
Does anyone think it's weird that you don't see Joe Biden walking out of the White House onto Marine One and taking off?
Yeah.
Does anyone think it's weird that many of Joe Biden's public appearances have been from the State Department or from, did you see him from the hardware store?
Yeah.
Or, what is going on?
Yeah. This guy is incognito. He is incognito.
And they say that Kamala Harris is not in the vice president's residence because it's undergoing renovation. Air Force One is maybe having renovation, maybe being replaced. There's one little odd thing after another. So what does all of this mean? I don't know. Yeah. Why do you have troops in the Capitol? I have absolutely no idea. At first I thought it was okay. They're making a big point out of January 6th, because the armed insurrection that wasn't armed and wasn't an insurrection is being used to justify domestic surveillance. In fact, let's be honest, it's used to justify using the domestic surveillance they've already done, right? Because look at Carter Page. And there's been no reckoning for spying on Carter Page or anyone else in the Trump campaign, or, by the way, Mike McCall, Lindsey Graham, Bernie Sanders, all the other people they were spying on. And the people who were responsible for that, some of them are back in government, in power.
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah. But you know one thing, Laura? They would never let General Flynn conduct that criminal audit. General Flynn was brought in by Trump to do a criminal audit, and they were never, ever going to let him do it.
Well, John, as you know, I'm personal friends with General Flynn and his wife, Lori, and I know many of their family too. And I have known for years that the number one reason they targeted General Michael Flynn first was because he cannot be bought, that man. He is someone who stands up for principle, who says things, he says exactly what he means. He sees things for what they are, and he is not afraid, and he is not backing down. And, I do have to say one thing that you can really help with. It is unconscionable and really unfair that the very first time the Flynn family was able to be back together after he, his legal troubles were finally settled and he was pardoned by President Trump, and the media has taken a family photograph of them together, and they keep using that picture as a symbol of, insane people that believe in the even more insane conspiracies of QAnon. And that is not representative of the family. It is not accurate. It is not true. It is wrong, and it is unfair. And people need to stop doing that now. If there's any journalist out there who has a conscience or who has any sense of integrity or character, they need to stop doing that. It is unfair to the Flynn family. They have been tortured. I mean, they have been through absolute hell, and really because somebody that powerful people in this country did not want to be exposed by, and used General Flynn and targeted him in a prosecution that was nothing short of evil. I mean, it truly was. These people will stop at nothing. They'll come after me. They've come after me before. They'll come after you. They'll come after anyone, and they literally want to deprive you of everything. They're happy to see you starving to death, your children starving in the street with you, having lost everything.
We're not going to let that happen, Laura, because I'm going to tell you right now, I've got your back. I've got General Flynn's back. In fact, I'm a friend of Sydney's a good friend of mine. I can't wait to get General Flynn on my show. I want to do some upgrades technically for the show that we don't have yet. Just some bells and whistles to make it look prettier. But I'm looking forward to having General Flynn on the show.
He wouldn't care about the bells and whistles.
I know he wouldn't. I know that he wouldn't.
And I just want to say on the other, to finish the last answer of that question, of is something coming? Is it not coming? The one thing I did think about, though, was if you really went after all the people that were involved, I mean, look at how high it goes. Oh. When you have the former director of the CIA, John Brennan, you have the former DNI Clapper, you have all these people inside the FBI, Comey and McCabe and Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and all the others that we don't know about. And you start to go through the Justice Department. I mean, do you really think that you can just show up and with a couple of agents and issue an arrest warrant and arrest all of these? I mean, so you know what I mean? It's easy on the one hand to say, when is something going to be done and what are they going to be doing? But on the other hand, don't you need something much bigger, much more significant in order to really address the criminal nature of what was done? That's my thought. And I'm not an expert on it. And, I'm working on Privacy in the Digital Age is the next season of my show. And at the same time, I'm still working the border. So, and these are very difficult investigations, very detailed. It's hard to get to the truth. Everything is potentially explosive. There's a plethora of misinformation and disinformation. They have truly horrible people out there, across the media, at places like CNN and the Daily Beast, that want to come after you and smear you. They keep trying to paint me as some right-wing lunatic and say, And which is really funny because anyone who knows me, right, and knows my work knows
Yeah,
that
you're furthest
nobody
from that.
owns me. Yeah, I don't work for the left and I don't work for the right. I don't work for any of these people. What I care about is the truth. And everywhere I go in this country, even when I go to places like in California, where you think, well, people aren't going to talk to me because my show's on Fox Nation. It never ceases to amaze me that it doesn't matter who they are, how old they are, how young they are, what race they are, where they live. People want to talk to me all the time about the things that they're worried about. And they want to know the truth. And the number one question is, where do I go to just get the facts? I just want the facts. If I want opinion, I know who to watch. I know what to read. What has happened to our media that they can't just do this? And the most egregious part of all is the way the New York Times and all of these other newspapers, they take one opinion and one view of the world and they fold that into the facts and they try to write it as fact. And it's really been harmful to journalism to blend things like that. There used to be a much more obvious separation between the opinion pages and the news itself. And those distinctions are gone. And it's, that is really makes me sad.
Well, unfortunately, CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, they've done this. They've allowed this to happen. They made this happen. Okay. And then everybody wonders why no one believes you. Okay. Well, take a look in the mirror. That's why no one believes you. Okay. Look, anybody that, whether you know Laura, whether you don't know her, she does outstanding work. She's going to bring the truth to you just like we do. And look, if you're looking for truth, if you really want the truth, then seek the truth because it's there. Now, I will say this, Senator Ron Johnson, Congressman Nunes, Jim Jordan, and others, they've been requesting those FOIA requests since even before Trump took office. And,
outrageous. That's outrageous.
They wouldn't give him the paperwork, slow walk. Here's my whole point. My whole point is I know why they can't get those documents. The reason that they can't get those documents is because the DOJ, the FBI, 75% of our Congress, our courts, they're subject in the investigation, okay, themselves. Okay, and this goes from the Obama Oval Office down to over 600 counties in the United States of people that are on the take that stole money from the American taxpayer. That's what this is about.
I would say, John, if you're using American tax dollars to surveil people because they voted for Donald Trump or they went to the Capitol on January 6th, then you're stealing from the American people. If you're using American tax dollars to teach children in schools that they are racist because of the color of their skin and they have to apologize and atone for their whiteness, then you're stealing from all the American people of every race.
That's right.
And I don't know about the 600 counties and that level of particular specific detail, but I can say that it is obvious at this point. We know because just look at the people in the Justice Department who have been involved in this, whether it's Bruce Orr, whose wife Nellie Orr was working for Fusion GPS, who were both instrumental in acting as part of the misinformation campaign against Trump. And it goes, all the way up. I mean, really, there's so much evidence at that point. At this point, there's testimonies under oath. But why doesn't the National Archive speak up? What do the National Archive have and not have? Because they should have by law, they should have all of these records. What has been submitted to them and what hasn't been submitted to them? I mean, that's something that's really worth looking at because as a journalist, in such a highly politicized environment where it's so hard to get to the truth, you're always looking for those things that are, somehow have a degree of independent credibility, right? And that used to be law enforcement, but now it's not, obviously. That used to be, Department of Justice. It's not them anymore. So is it down now to the National Archives to say, to be honest about what they have and what they don't have? Because there are federal record-keeping laws, which is something that I mean, still burns me as a journalist and someone who really cares about the truth that we still haven't reported the truth on Hillary Clinton's emails.
or
You know,
or Ukraine. Look,
or Ukraine.
I talked to a U.S. attorney that told me that the Ukrainian government contacted him. He was the first person they contacted, a U.S. attorney. They brought not only the evidence, but government witnesses from Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
They were ready to prosecute the Bidens.
Mm-hmm.
They took it to the DOJ, and the DOJ said, we're not interested.
Oh, John, can you explain to me why George Soros's people are having joint meetings at the U.S. Embassy in Ukraine with groups that they're funding? I mean, I don't know of any other time where
I tell you what
U.S.
it is,
government
Laura.
and U.S. ambassadors abroad are joining forces with political organizations like that, which have such a defined agenda that is not what the people have elected people for.
That's right. That's right. And we cannot allow, and this is for Americans out there, listen, we cannot allow our military to be politicized anymore. Enough is enough, because I'm going to tell you right now, these matters, as far as I'm concerned, to get you don't want to provide those documents after 5-6 years of FOIA requests. I'll send in the Marines. It falls under our founding documents. I mean,
don't go getting me into trouble here now.
Not you,
crazy
not you,
ideas,
Laura.
John.
I'm just saying that sooner or later, the Marines, their number one duty is to protect from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Foreign and domestic. That doesn't matter if it's Congress.
Well, that's
it doesn't
not just
matter
the
who it
Marines.
is.
That's not just the Marines. If you look at the legal charters, of course, the United States Armed Forces were created to protect this country and the Constitution from all enemies, both foreign and domestic.
Yes.
How exactly that breaks down into who can be deployed and who can't and what they can be used for. There's Title 32, there's Title 10, there's Title 50. 32, of course, is the National Guard, and Title 10 are your armed services. 50 is your intelligence activities. And then there's Posse Comitatus, which is, about not using your military against your own and protecting people from the tyranny of, military takeovers and things like that. However, I will say we do not know what those troops are doing in the capital of this country today.
That's
we don't
true.
know why they're really there, and we don't know what they're really doing. We don't know who they're protecting and who they're protecting other people from. We also don't know why so many of them were deputized as U.S. Marshals. There's been no explanation of that.
Yeah, we're still waiting on that.
Yeah, and we really don't know about accountability. We don't know about accountability for a lot of things that have gone on. And we don't know about accountability for what they're doing now. I mean, look at it. They said that this was an armed insurrection on January 6th. No weapons were confiscated inside the Capitol. I mean, and if you're going to be an insurrectionist, John, do you post it all over social media and then take pictures of it? And then when other people are taking pictures of it and then go home and put it all over your social media? Come on.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Give me a break. It's time for this nonsense to end. Let's, sure, if people broke the law or if they hurt people, 100% they should be held to account. But now you're going to start labeling everyone as domestic terrorists, and you're going to have idiots masquerading as journalists going out there saying, oh, the parallels between Al-Qaeda and ISIS, and these domestic terrorists are striking. And you're going to let John McCabe and General Stanley McChrystal and, all these other people, Clapper, you're going to let them go out and make these kind of comparisons? I'm not sure that Clapper did. I know it was Brennan, I know it was McCabe, and I know it was McChrystal. And what I heard those three people saying was outrageous. And McChrystal of all people, one thing, McChrystal of all people should be ashamed of himself, because he saw with his own eyes, General Austin and General McChrystal, you saw the soldiers that gave their lives. You saw their coffins. You saw the pieces that were left of their bodies.
That's right.
You saw the Americans who survived with their faces burned off and their legs blown off, their limbs blown off, their arms blown off, their insides hanging out. You saw the wreckage of those troops, and you have the temerity to go out there and compare people who voted
Right.
for Trump or who went to the Capitol on January 6th to them? Seriously? And you're going to let the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Anti-Defamation League and Media Matters for America and the ACLU, you're going to let them forget what they were really founded for and really supposed to represent all of the people of this country and the principles, with the exception, of course, of Media Matters, because they've always been a propaganda organization.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to let those people carry out a campaign that is built on hate and intent on tyranny. You're going to align with those forces to demonize and terrorize the people in this country. Wow.
And there was another general too. He's a retired general.
Oh, the honorary.
I couldn't think of his name. It was honorary. When he came out with his statement, I was like, "You've got to be kidding me! Who are you?"
No, and never mind that. This is the man you're going to appoint to investigate the Capitol, who's already gone out and said the most outrageous things from the beginning. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Guess what, America? He's a racist. Okay? He's a racist. I said it. He's a black racist.
You know what, look, John? You know what these people are about? They're about dividing this country.
They are. They're about dividing Marxism, the CCP. And by the way, as a side note, Biden's pick to leave the CIA, William Burns, he's got direct ties to the CCP. We better keep an eye on William Burns. We've got just a minute left, Laura. I've kept you way longer than I even anticipated, but it's been a great discussion. With the George Floyd trial about to start, they've been doing a jury selection. What do you see happening there?
Okay, so how do you have jury selection in the George Floyd trial?
Right.
I don't know. I mean, really? There was someone in this country who didn't see the news about George Floyd at the time? I don't know how that works. I guess I guess in these big cases like this, you just have to make the most of it, and that there are other determinations. If you have someone that appears to be as fair-minded as possible in your jury selection, you pick them. I don't know. What I can tell you is this. So, John, I have a really soft heart, and on a basically human level, it was unbearable for me to watch what happened to George Floyd. No matter what the circumstances were, no matter what the autopsy reports say, no matter what the different views are, I'm just going to tell you, for me, that was painful. And I still can't watch it again. I mean, I tried to look at the other camera angles analytically as a journalist, and I've watched thousands of beheading videos in the Middle East, when I was doing a story on the butcher of Mosul, right, to figure out which were his beheadings and which one, not. And I've seen a lot of terrible things, and covering not just the cartels, but everything. And I really don't like to see people suffer or struggle or, plead for their lives. So that broke my heart. And I don't ever want anyone innocent to ever be targeted or killed. I can't stand injustice. But I will say, setting that aside, it was very obvious to me from the very beginning that there were powerful political forces in this country who have for a long time exploited racial divisions and racial problems and racial issues. And unfortunately, some of them are the people that I, for a moment, looked up to as unifying symbols of how to overcome racism and division, like Obama. I was completely enamored with him the first time he ran, and really had great hope that he would rise to the level of someone like Nelson Mandela. But that was a mistake. That was a mistake on my part. I was wrong. And what I was so surprised by was how Obama left office. Instead of in being a unifying force, he left office as such a divisive force, focused on all of the racial issues. And that was really that was a warning sign for me, because I was like, wow, Mandela came out of prison talking about unity. He talked about unity all the way into office as the first democratically elected president of South Africa. He talked unity throughout his first term. And when he left office, he was still talking unity. And I always joke and say to people that even though he's gone and he's dead, if you put his name on the ballot box in South Africa, they'd vote him into power again, black and white. And yet you have people in this country who claim to be leaders, who claim to care about race, who claim to care about their own communities, who are doing nothing more than using race as a tool, and sometimes with violence. And they're being protected by equally horrible people who, many of whom might believe in Marxism or communism, like the people who founded BLM. But when you really look at it, they're all just being used too, because who controls the money? Who's really behind the money? The organizations and the people who really are pushing and hold the purse strings to all of this. They don't believe in Marxism. They don't believe in communism. They're using Marxists and communists and those doctrines as much as they're using anybody and everything else. What they really believe in is tyranny. They believe in absolute control. One-party institutions for a one-party world.
Yeah, and you look into those communities and all those millions of dollars that were given to that organization, the Black community didn't see any of that money. Okay. Mm-hmm. And you have people like Al Sharpton, who calls himself a reverend. And you have people like Farrakhan and LeBron James and even Oprah Winfrey, who, I used to respect Oprah Winfrey. I have lost all respect for her because she has become a race baiter. Okay.
You know what, John? You know what I do? I don't go into the personality people side of it, because for me, it's always about the principles. So yes, I have, Oprah's done many things that I've loved and respected. She's done some things that I think, oh my goodness, wow, that's disappointing. But I think that if we concentrate on those things, we get distracted. Look at Donald Trump. He is the perfect example. I said this till I was blue in the face. It's not about Trump. It's not about Trump. It's about the principles. And the moment they were done with Trump and they could push him aside, what did they focus on? The people, because they'll do anything not to focus on the principles. Here are the principles: our God-given rights, freedom.
That's right.
Justice for all. Justice for all. Equality for all. That doesn't mean equal outcomes. That means
indivisible
for all. Well, it's unfortunate you chose that name, John, because there's a very radical, progressive political organization called Indivisible.
I heard. But my Indivisible has to do with patriotism and to me,
principles, John.
That's right.
It's got to do with principles.
Yeah.
Do you believe in freedom?
They stole it from me as a veteran. And I'm going to have words with them if I ever run into them. Listen,
they may predate your show. You better watch out. Careful what you say. They've got lots of, lawyers ready to sue. That's one of the tactics.
I'm sure they do. Lara, we covered a lot of ground. Thank you for spending so much time with me. And to America, if you didn't know Lara, you know her now. A little bit more about her. I highly recommend that you watch her amazing show on Fox Nation, Lara Logan Investigates. She does amazing work.
You're a good man, John. You have a good heart.
Oh, I just love your work, and I'm trying to model again, not being trained, as we talked about. I'm trying to model my path after you, a mixture of maybe Mark Levin. Look, Hannity always says, he always talks about Joe Biden's cognitive skills every single night. And boy, we sure are seeing it, America. But it's people like Lara Logan that are bringing the truth, and we're just grateful to have her. And we hope she'll come back.
Thank you for being so generous and kind. I don't know if I'm all of those things, but I do try.
You are to me, Lara, and I love you. God bless you. Okay. And we'll see you next time, America. Thank you.
Bye-bye.